about dynamic forms and workflows today. It's a little bit different from what you guys have been learning here, I think, but I think it's a really kind of interesting field for beginning developers because the tools are really easy to learn if you have this kind of basic fundamental knowledge of programming. The tools that help you build these forms and workflows do a lot of it for you, and you can build really sophisticated apps pretty quickly. Just a quick background on myself. My slide's not working, so you guys might have to click that for me.
Oh, that's on yours.
On mine?
Yeah. If you just click on the screen and then.
Nope, it's not working. I can't see it. Is it? Oh my god. See, it's not working.
So sorry. This never happened before. Maybe you should set up one.
Yeah. I'm sorry too. Oh.
I think the screen is on the right side of it, so you move the mouse.
Yeah, wait, oh, oh, wait, that got one over. This is crazy. Kind of. There it goes. Go to the right.
There you go.
Nope, there you go. Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, I can do this. Anyway, a little background about myself. I'm a technical writer. I work for Techsou. We're a Boeing subsidiary. We make unmanned aerial systems, also known as drones. My background, though, is mostly in journalism and communications. I took the Tech Academy course about a year and a half ago. I was working at an airline as a technical writer as well, writing maintenance manuals, and people kept coming to me asking for forms that could do a lot more with automated workflows and conditional content. So I didn't really know how to do that stuff. I didn't know it was possible until I took this course, obviously. One thing I learned in my career, a lot of business processes lend themselves really well to automation and dynamic workflows. Anything like receiving orders, invoicing, shipping products, all of those types of processes are going to use forms to collect data. And they're going to use workflows to route and move that data. So it's a really good industry to get in. I mean, it's a good sort of niche category of development to get into because every single industry has a need for this type of development. Everybody uses it. It's maybe not as sexy as like Ruby on Rails, but it's really useful. Quick overview of basically what I'm talking about when I'm talking about forms and workflows. The old school method obviously used to be you have a paper form and your workflow is somebody physically has to take that form and get a bunch of approval signatures on it and file it in the file cabinet. Or you have a static Word form or a PDF form that a bunch of people have to sign and you're filing it in a file folder in a shared drive somewhere. So the problem with those is obviously that none of the data in the form itself is searchable. You can find the form, you can go search for the form, but you can't use a database of all the data inside the forms. So now everybody's trying to move and switch to dynamic forms that you fill out in the web browser. And this is not just for companies asking their customers to fill out forms. I'm talking about internal forms as well within the company. So you have a shipping department who maybe needs to get like 3 different people to sign off on a shipment before they can ship it out, which is really common. Or they have to have like conditional approvals. Like if it's a certain type of shipment, this person has to look at it, and if it's raining today, somebody else has to look at it. So that can actually get really complicated when people are trying to do that through email, because you always run into a situation where somebody's like, oh, but I sent it to somebody. I sent it to the approver, they just never sent it back. So you run into all these delays, and everybody's pointing fingers. It's really hard to see what's actually happening. So a lot of companies are moving towards a system where we're going to automate everything. We're going to do everything in a web browser. We're going to have a searchable database for all of this. It also creates a really great audit trail if you look at a regulated industry like I do, which turns out to be really important. So basically what we're talking about are data capture systems when we talk about dynamic forms and workflows. And those are typically made up of three parts. First, you need a database to store all the data in. Then you need a user interface form that the users are actually typing all their information into, and it's sort of the front end of the database. So they don't have to type their information into a database because most people don't know how to do that. And then you have your automated workflows that you have to program, that kind of adding the logic behind the scenes, telling it where it needs to go and why and how. I'm going to talk about the programs that I mostly use to do this. A couple of them are, I'm going to talk about SharePoint and Intex later, which is more common, I think, than this one, although Adobe has a pretty large market share for really large companies. I make all my dynamic forms in Adobe Lifecycle, which is actually turning into AEM forms. They're just changing the name. They've upgraded the system. It's a really powerful system, actually. And basically, it's a one-stop design tool where you can render XML forms as PDF or HTML. So it's really, really useful. I have a couple of examples just to sort of talk through and show you like why I think this is great for beginning developers, because again, the tools do a lot of it for you. Like this is the Lifecycle/AEM tool environment. There's a little bit of design involved too. Obviously, there's a layout page where you add all of your objects. You have your object panel on the right. You have your object hierarchy. You have your scripting window, and you have some design tools at the top. So it's fairly simple, and it's pretty easy to get up to speed with. Another thing that I really love about this program is again, they make the scripting really easy. You pick your scripting event that you want to add your script to. So if you want to put it on the pre-save event or a click event or a button, it's really easy to do that and just make super cool apps really quickly. Just an example of some code thrown in there. This was a cool case, actually, an interesting case. A lot of people want to do unique IDs for not just for the form, for the form itself, but for each page in the form for different reasons. So this was a way to script that to basically add a Unix timestamp for each page as it initializes, so it gets its own special number. So it's kind of fun to do. It also has a really great function where you can add scripting objects to your form, so you can write a whole function and use that anywhere in your form over and over and over again. This is one of the examples of if you make forms for large businesses, you run into custom validation issues a lot. This particular form, they wanted to send it out to a customer who would choose product A or product B at the beginning, and then based on that choice, the form's going to populate different types of questions for them to fill out. But they also want to make sure the customer fills out every single field in the form. So if we just added a regular validation, they'll never be able to submit the form because all those hidden fields are blank. So we had to write a script to basically ask it to loop through the form, look for all the visible fields, make those required only, and then check to make sure they filled them out, and basically disable the signature until that happens. Another great thing about these kinds of programs, usually you have access to the XML source. So if you really want to, you can go in there and really mess it up. Or fix it. Or fix it once in a while. Like there's a bug that you just can't figure out like why it's not working, and if you go in there, you'll find like a stray character that's throwing everything off. So that's really cool to do. The other reason these are great is because basically you're not building a flat static file like a Word document or something. You're actually building an XML data package. So you can export all that XML to basically any server or storage system that you want. There's a lot of options on how you can do that out there. So there's a lot of tools available. They tend to be super expensive tools that have to be enterprise-wide. So if you have the ability to write a custom API to take that data package and drop it into your server, that's a super valuable skill. The other tool that I use a lot to do these kinds of business process workflows is SharePoint. A lot of companies use SharePoint. It's just a web-based collaborative tool. It is a storage database, but it's not a relational database. But it's still a pretty pretty powerful tool because you can build a lot of workflows onto it. One issue with it is that you used to build the forms for SharePoint in something called InfoPath, which is also a Microsoft product, which they've basically discontinued. So a lot of people in the industry are scrambling to figure out how are we going to replace all those forms and continue to do what we're doing. There are a couple of options. So people who know a little bit about programming can build custom apps in Access or surveys in Excel hosted online. They're kind of janky though, and it's like it doesn't quite work for every use case. So if you're really good and you know your stuff and you can build custom .NET SharePoint forms, that's really sort of the high-end development on this. There are a lot of jobs looking for people who do that kind of thing because basically after 2023, I think everybody's InfoPath forms are going to be broken. But the custom .NET SharePoint forms you can build in Visual Studio, and you can basically do whatever you want. You can fully customize it. The other tool that I actually use a lot and is good for beginning software programmers is Mintex. It's a third-party program, and it's kind of, I think, getting a lot of the market share. Most of the people that I've talked to doing this kind of thing are starting to use this tool or custom.NET if they're good enough. But Mintex is great. It does the form and the workflow for you, and has another really easy interface. Oh, and if you wanted to like go the real like super amazing SharePoint developer route, like those are pretty much the things you need to know, which I think most of those are actually taught in this course. So, yeah. But this is the Mintex tool that a lot of companies are moving towards. And again, if you know just a little bit about programming, you can pick it up really quickly. It has a super simple sort of like drag and drop interface where you drag all your labels and your objects, and then you can add sort of pseudo code and like basically Excel style formulas into the form to get it to do all your fancy validations and things. The workflow tool in Intex too is super simple. If you understand programming concepts like for loops, conditional content statements, you basically are dragging all of those objects and creating your workflow, and it's going to basically lay it out like a Visio diagram. You can also export these into Visio, which is kind of fun and impresses your bosses. So I just want to talk really quickly too about the main reasons why a lot of businesses are doing this. The cool part about having a system like this is basically you can collect metrics and do a lot of data analysis. So processes that were happening, again, before within email, businesses didn't really have a lot of insight into how long things were taking, like turnaround times, where the bottlenecks are, like what's taking so long with a shipment, like who's taking long to approve things. You get a lot of information like site traffic and status updates. You can do qualitative analysis, not just quantitative, so you can actually look at comparisons year over year and really generate a lot of meaningful data with these systems. One of my use cases that I did was basically for a shipping department building a really large sort of SharePoint approval tool with a really complicated workflow, but the shipments had to go to, like I said, a number of different people, and it really depended on what was actually in the shipment, on who had to approve it or look at it or do something with it before it went out the door. But at the end of that, we had 6 months worth of data on how long these approvals were taking and exactly how much time between the request went into the system and it went out, and we had some really cool numbers and figures to pull for the company, which was really great. And if you're interested, just some extra resources here. It's kind of hard to get a hold of these tools, like if you're not working in a company that has them, but TechDog has some free Mintex training videos that are really cool to take a look at. Obviously, Adobe has some information on their website about lifecycle and ADM forms, which is a super cool tool. But even if you don't have access to them, if you wanted to get a job as a SharePoint developer or something, I think even if you, say, created some macros in Word, in Excel, or in Access, and built some forms on top of a database in Access, and had that in your portfolio, it would be fairly easy to break into this SharePoint development industry. And I also just have this thrown in at the end here. I just wanted to sort of my own like helpful tips, something I feel like has helped me in my career as I've moved into the workflow design space. It's really been sort of 3 questions that I always ask when I start designing one of these systems, and I think about, they're great questions to ask like wherever you're at, but you can even ask them in a job interview to show that you're interested in solving their problems. But you want to kind of find out what systems are you currently using in your business processes, what are the pain points with the systems, like what tasks are really repetitive or manual that could probably be automated a lot easier, and what are you trying to measure? So kind of by answering those 3 questions, you already have like a structure to design your system around, and you can really solve a lot of business problems and a lot of business delays by creating a system like this. And in my experience, when you solve people's problems, they get really excited, and sometimes they promote you. So that's all I had. You guys have some questions for me?
Like, how do you ended up like getting into that field? Like, what like?
So yeah, when I was a tech writer, like I said, just kind of working on writing maintenance manuals, people would come to me, they're like, oh, you work on documents, right? Like, can you, like, I don't understand why the signature field is broken, like in this PDF. Can you just help me? So I kind of started just helping people on the side, like at work, like digging into fixing these kinds of problems, and then started like, oh, if I add some custom JavaScript to this form, like I can make it interactive, and I can make it really like super easy, so nobody has to really think about it. They don't have to even email it. There's just a button on it. So I started just doing that for people at my company, and then I took this course to get better at JavaScript so I could make better forms. And then I was looking for jobs based on that. And the job that I'm currently at, when in the job description they were looking for somebody that knew JavaScript and specifically could create dynamic lifecycle and PDF forms. So I've been doing that for a couple of years now.
Gotcha. So like usually like if I were to go say and do a search online for like that type of like job that you do, like what are like the terms like technical writer or?
Yeah, you can search for that. Form specialist, document control, SharePoint developer. There are a lot of SharePoint development jobs.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. That was easy.
Okay, so yeah, no one has any questions? No?
Solve 100.
Yeah.